One day she came back.
Yeah. The east side. Test.
Kevin, are you good? We good? We good to go? All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I will call this meeting to order. I can't help but think the sign of the times that we are living in, that we have a meeting in the year 2024 over short-term rentals. And who would have thought that might be a topic of conversation, those of us are, from 30 years or so ago. But here we are, and so it is, and I'm very proud and honored that we can have what is a historic meeting, the first public community forum conversation discussion that will discuss and talk about short-term rentals. It's a conversation, as you probably know, is happening all across the country. The fact that it's happening in Columbia tells you that Columbia is a part of the communities across the country that have tourism, that have needs for short-term rentals for various reasons, and certainly we know that we are a part of that because we are seeing that in pretty large part across our community. Let me start by first welcoming you all here. My name is Chaz Mulder, and I'm the mayor of the city of Columbia. I'm joined this evening by the vice mayor, Randy McBroom, who is here. He gets the round of applause here from him. Probably a former classmate, although surely I've got a former classmate somewhere in the room. Also here this evening is Councilmember Debbie Wiles. She's sitting, and also Councilmember Danny Coleman. I know we may have some other council members who may be joining us throughout the evening. Let me also say I am going to provide some opening remarks and then defer to staff, and then I am going to have to actually leave after that. The one thing that I am proud to say is that this meeting is being live streamed, so we may have some folks watching live as we speak now. But additionally, this meeting will be archived and will be placed on the city website so that we can ensure that those who could not be here this evening or could not stay this evening or may not have been able to participate, they're going to see this video. So I think this is a meeting that will be seen by thousands and thousands in the next weeks and months ahead, and including me. I look forward to coming back and watching the video from the meeting and the conversation that does ensue this evening. I've heard from so many folks on this issue, literally from executives at some of the national and international corporations such as Airbnb and VRBO, some of whom may even be in the room, to folks who live here in Columbia who have short-term rentals, who have genuine concerns about what's happening and about what we're doing. I want you to know that I hear all of those concerns, and what I'm really proud about is the fact that our staff, the Development Services Department, for which we have a very skilled and sophisticated team of professionals who do this based upon some stringent education and training that they've gone through, that they've led us to this moment of having that public conversation. And so I would be remiss if I did not point out a special thanks to the staff of Development Services Department, who you're going to be hearing from this evening. Let me also say, you might not realize this, but until the zoning ordinance that we're now operating under that was passed in the year 2022, there was actually no reference to short-term rentals whatsoever. It was not even a concept that was envisioned, because at the time that ordinance was passed, there was really no such thing as short-term rentals, certainly in the formalized setting that we know them today. So in fact, the 2022 ordinance that was passed by City Council was the first time that there was actually a reference to short-term rentals. Short-term rentals which were permitted in some certain areas, and which are permitted in some certain areas in the city of Columbia, which includes mixed-use character districts, which you'll hear more about this evening, but that are prohibited in single-family residential developments. And so, ironically, while we are here tonight for a conversation about how to handle short-term rentals, what we've just seen in 2022 was actually an expansion of short-term rentals that was not there previously. We know that there is a need. We know that there are many different opinions that may be had on this topic. Being in elected office, being the mayor, being on council, we have an opportunity to see firsthand that, we're not always going to agree on everything. But what we can do is we can have a conversation and try to find where some common ground can be met. And recognize that no matter what our differences may be, we're stronger by far about what unites us, and that is a love and care and concern for this community in which we live, in which we are raising our families. The reason I have to leave right after this is because I have to go get my daughter from dance, and then my son to basketball, and my wife is with my daughter at horse riding lessons. And so I think I have that right for the record. It's now documented on video, so hopefully I don't get graded later. But I point that out as I have kids. I'm raising kids here right now, and just like all of you in this room who have some vested interest, we just want this place to be the best it can possibly be. We're proud of the fact that we have a community that people want to come to, spend the day, spend the weekend, and we should embrace that fact. I do hope to see in the coming years more actual hotels in the core center of the city of Columbia. Just for the record, I think that that is an area where we are lacking is hotels in the core of Columbia proper. I think that's something that you're going to see sooner rather than later. A couple of projects currently that are actually underway that will enhance the hotel offerings. But for this evening, we're here to talk more about short-term rentals and sort of different opinions and thoughts and have a conversation, again, a community conversation. So with that, I will just leave you with the final thank you for your presence, for your care about this community and about this topic. I think that we will be better off by having had this conversation as we look back to make changes that will likely occur as soon as December of this year, when we plan to make the final update to our zoning ordinance updates that we've made throughout this year. So again, I pointed out the very skilled and sophisticated team that we have. I'm so proud and honored to be the mayor of this community where I grew up in. And among the many honors is the fact that I get to be the mayor of a community that has such a skilled team working for it on a day-to-day basis. And that is included with the Development Services Department. So I will call now on our city planner, Kevin McCarthy, who's going to provide an overview of what to expect and get into some substance and deep dive and get the conversation going. So thank you once again for your presence this evening.
All right, thank you everybody for being here. So I've been here just shy of 3 years, and in that time we've done several rounds of zoning text amendments. We've updated our comprehensive plan. We did some similar engagement with food truck operators, and I think this is the biggest turnout we've gotten any single event. So obviously it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in. I'm kind of surprised at the level of interest. Like the mayor said, we've been working on zoning text amendments throughout the year. So the current zoning ordinance was adopted in July of 2022. Throughout 2024, we've been working on sort of some targeted updates to it. Each quarter, we've been bringing the Planning Commission and the Council sort of a round of text amendments. And in the fourth quarter, which we're in now, we're looking at limited use standards and the use table, which includes short-term rentals. So the purpose of this meeting, if you think short-term rentals are great, and you want to give all the reasons why that is, you can explain that to Planning Commission and Council later on. If you think they're terrible, same thing. What we're looking for now is your ideas for what should go in the zoning ordinance. And so then on November 6th, there'll be a joint study session between the Planning Commission and the City Council, and staff will bring sort of what we hear tonight from you all who have taken the time to attend, the ideas, the suggestions that you offer. We'll compile that and present that to the Planning Commission, and they can recommend changes to we'll present that to the study session of the Council and Planning Commission. And then in December, the Planning Commission will vote to make recommendations to Council to amend the ordinance. And so you'll see the ideas that you recommend here in the form of a proposed zoning text amendment, and then those will be forwarded to the City Council in January and February and become effective, whatever that change is, if any change, February of 2025. So there's a few of us here right now. Like the mayor said, we are streaming this and recording this. So Principal Planner Austin Brass and I are going to go from side to side in the room and sort of get your suggestions. If you could, we'll have the microphone, we'll pass it back and forth. If you say who you are and where you live, and then sort of give us your suggestion, and we'll sort of start this conversation around the room. If you're not comfortable being on camera and making those comments in this setting, Planner 2, Robert Archibald, is out here, and he's happy to have a conversation with you, answer any questions you have about what are the current regulations, what we know about what other cities in Middle Tennessee do, what the geography of the city is in terms of where you can and can't currently have a short-term rental and what those limitations are. And then our Director of Tourism and Marketing, Kelly Murphy, has a laptop open over here that has a survey where you can give us written comments. You can do it anonymously if you want, or you can give us your email address for follow-up, and we'll include that in what we present to the Planning Commission and City Council later on. So we've got some questions, some ideas. If you can read my terrible handwriting, we've got some thoughts here, but just sort of to frame it, to get it started. But we're happy to hear any ideas you have for how the city, whether the city should regulate short-term rentals, and if so, how, where it should be located, what the limited standards should be, what the permitting process should look like. Sort of the floor is open for the topic of short-term rentals. Also, we do have the Vice Mayor and then our boss, Mr. Paul Keltner, Director of Development Services, and he's, gosh, you've been here since you were 10 years old probably, so if you've got questions about, me and Austin can't necessarily answer, well, why, what happened here in 2005 or whatever, but Mr. Keltner can give us that institutional knowledge.
We also have people in overflow who will have questions.
Okay, excellent. All right. So then to get started, who wants to get started?
Can you define short-term rental?
Sure. Short-term rental right now in zoning ordinance, short-term rental is a tenancy that is less than 30 days. You're renting a room in a house or the entire house for a period of less.
Is that less than 30 consecutive days? Or is that 30 days?
30 consecutive days.
You're streaming this, you may want to have.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping to get comments from you all, not from me.
Also, Ken, to with the current zoning code, how we have it written. So in most residential districts, for example, if you're in a CD3, short-term rentals in the current zoning code is prohibited. And then if you're in a commercial district, it is allowed subject to its owner occupied. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think the premise of this was to discuss, should we allow them in single-family residential districts? Should we have stipulations on them in single-family residential districts? And then likewise, if it's in the downtown commercial district or in a commercial zoning district, should it be owner-occupied? So I think we're kind of going around the room to discuss those regulations and if they should be changed or not. So it looks like we have a hand here in the back. And then also, if you can, just state your name and address.
I'm Michael Knox. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Realty, but also I live in Mount Pleasant, but I'm a partial owner in a property here in Columbia. It seems to me that the easiest way to administer this would be to basically allow people to use their home and their property as they choose. I notice you have up there on the board. Thank you. I notice you have on the board, it says allow by right everywhere or in blank districts. I think allow by right everywhere is where we need to be. You see, when we restrict that, it's almost like the government is now picking winners and losers and who can profit from their home and who cannot. And so that makes it very difficult. Also, it's easier to administer if you allow by right everywhere. So and with the current thing being owner occupied, the property that we have is currently being operated as a midterm rental, but we would like to be able to toggle back and forth between the two, but we're currently not able to do that. So in slow months, it has to sit empty, which is a burden to us and also doesn't benefit anyone else. So if that makes sense. Thank you.
Rob Bramblett. I currently live up on the hill, Theta Mountain, but we have owned and do own Airbnbs. As a matter of fact, I think we may have had the first one in Columbia. We started before the 2022 ordinance was passed, and we've had 1,500 different bookings directly on Airbnb. We've had some on the VRBO and some of the other sites, and that constitutes about 5,500 days booked here in downtown Columbia. So there's a lot of business that's obviously come to me, a lot of business that's come to the area. We've got business owners that we have promoted that are in the area right downtown. We've owned commercial space in downtown. We have commercial CD4 currently Airbnb. So very vested in the question, very vested in really the city of Columbia. And the way that I see it is there's not a lot of places to stay down here, right? So people traveling in, we have lots of cool things to see. We have Mule Day. We have all of these different things that we want people to come do. We got great restaurants. We really want foot traffic in our downtown area. There's 100 reasons why this is a good idea to get people coming in. The way that one of ours is zoned CD4, it requires owner occupancy. It's a duplex. Technically, we could probably make something work with the other side. But a lot of the Airbnbs, including some of ours, have not been duplexes and been single-family homes. And I don't know, I probably won't ask for a show of hands, who would go and stay in someone else's home with them staying there. It's just not a reasonable thing to do. As a matter of fact, VRBO has an entire marketing strategy where they say, have the place all to yourself. Don't come down and see somebody in their underwear making breakfast, right? This is not something we want as families traveling. So we've had, like I said, countless people stay. A lot of people that do come through come back through. We have one actually. She's been staying with us for years and years. Her brother is right across the street. He's in very, very bad health. He's in Murray County Hospital all the time. And for her, having a place where she can go and just get some rest literally right across the street. It's just been, she cried when she heard that this was potentially a thing. So we know we're providing a service. There's nothing to stay in downtown Columbia. And when you start going out of town, the hotels are horrible. Quite honestly, I wouldn't have my family stay in them. I mean, there's some that are okay, but they're just not great. They don't feel like home, and they're not in walking distance. So I think that I would agree with the gentleman behind me. I think there's a concept that we've forgotten in American life, and that's by consent of the governed. So policies and regulations that are put in place without consent of the governed are, by definition, unconstitutional, and I'm very against it.
Thank you for those comments. That sounded very much like an argument in favor of something. It sounds generally an argument in favor of permitting short-term rentals by right everywhere in the city. Is that what you're proposing?
I would say we would all be happy to pay the tax.
Mm-hmm.
We already do.
Right.
Very happy.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a statement and also a question just to your point. My name is Suzanne Roberts. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, and own a short-term rental here in Columbia that is a triplex. It's 3 one-bedroom apartments. As of this morning, Columbia hotels have an average of 3-star ratings. There's not one Airbnb with less than a 4.8 rating in Columbia. So good job, everybody, hosting. My other thing is a question. How would the city, if you shut down certain Airbnbs in different zones, how would you regulate people who are not hosting, who are hosting but not using a platform such as Airbnb or VRBO? Because with VRBO or Airbnb, everything's regulated. People can't have large parties. You can't have noises. Your unit, your listing will get shut down through the platform. If you have a bad rating on Airbnb, no one's going to want to stay there. So when you have an Airbnb, you keep up your property, you host nice families. I know people in certain neighborhoods in Columbia who are using their property as short-term rentals, but not on a platform. So how do you regulate those people who have different people coming and going every week?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. From a staff perspective, that is one of the challenges. What we're looking for is suggestions for enforceable if we're going to regulate it, regulations which are enforceable and realistic to administer. And just to be clear, well, I don't know what members of Planning Commission and Council will propose, but I don't expect anyone to further restrict short-term rentals in the city, right? So right now you can have, in the areas which are shown in yellow on the map, you can have short-term rentals in an owner-occupied home, and the areas that are shown in pink, they are prohibited. So anything that is proposed will be an expansion more than likely out of the status quo or an expansion of short-term rentals. And so what we're looking for is suggestions for, what those regulations should be. And enforceable regulations, absolutely. If we don't, unless a neighbor complains, that would be the answer to your question. We would get a complaint from a neighbor and we'd follow up on that, but we wouldn't know about it otherwise. And just gentleman right here.
Hey, my name's Alex Pierce. I live right here in Columbia, Tennessee. So looking at this map right here, this meeting is regarding short-term rentals being allowed all across the city, right?
If that's a suggestion, yeah.
I'm someone that's here to completely suggest against doing that, against allowing them all across the city. And the reason I say that is because there are studies that do show that short-term rentals like Airbnb and VRBO have been known to displace people if they are implemented in certain neighborhoods in the wrong way. So, for example, if they're in a neighborhood where there are a lot of single-family homes, that could displace a family that actually needs to stay there on a long-term basis and create shortages for long-term housing for people that actually need it and that would actually live there. It can also lead to increased rents, which we've already experienced here in Columbia. My suggestion for this would be allow them in areas where it makes sense. So like right here near the square, that makes total sense. Even over here where the shopping areas are, that makes total sense. But I see no reason for short-term rentals to be allowed all the way out here in Sunnyside. I personally don't think that makes sense.
Is it the residential character of the neighborhood or
A little bit of both, proximity to the city as well as a residential character, because you can't. There are regulations on Airbnb and VRBO against parties, but that isn't stopping people from throwing parties. People throw parties at Airbnbs all the time, and just like with this regulation with the short-term rentals, you're not going to be able to stop everyone from having a short-term rental that's not owner-occupied, but there's always a certain way of going about regulating that. I do also believe that they should be owner-occupied homes rather than homes owned by people who don't live in Columbia.
everywhere?
Honestly, yeah. And I just say we should consider the people who live here and who are renters, and especially those who are like at the lowest of the low here, those people who can barely afford the housing that they do have, and or even those who may have trouble finding long-term affordable housing. And this is something that has been shown to exacerbate that issue. So I do ask that y'all consider that in this new regulation. Thank you.
We'll go to this side, and then we'll come back over here. I saw this gentleman first. We'll come back to you.
Hey, good evening. Thank you. My name is Stan Alderson. I live at 202 3rd Avenue in Riverside neighborhood. It's not Riverside short-term occupancy hood. It's a neighborhood. It's for neighbors. It's residential. It's where families are. Two of the three people who have spoken for short-term rentals here don't live in Columbia. It's capital manipulating our housing inventory. And our housing inventory has been manipulated with enough already. Our hotels that they talk about, well, they're transient housing. Our housing's, it's gone downward for that reason. I lived in East Nashville for 11 years. I moved back here 3 years ago. What Airbnbs have done to the neighborhoods there is just, they've kind of torn them apart. They pitted neighbor against neighbor. They pitted long-term renters against people who just come in and buy the place and kick them out. It's a tough problem, but I'm going to suggest no Airbnbs or no short-term rentals in single occupancy homes. Thank you.
All right, and this gentleman here, and then we had someone over here, and then the person in the blue suit.
One point that I wanted to bring up. Affordable housing prices that you mentioned. One property manager I spoke with here, Realty, they have properties all over the city that people can't get qualified or afford month-to-month leases. So they do week-to-week rentals. This has been going on for decades in Columbia, week-to-week. Because there's people who, these big landlords, if you don't have a 700 credit score, you can't get qualified for it anyways. So for some of our short-term rentals, and I'm a resident here in Columbia, for some of our short-term rentals, we've had single moms come and stay for 10 days, 15 days so they can get back on their feet because they lost their job, right? Because there's no good furnished housing opportunities anywhere else. And guess what? They didn't have to pass a credit check. They didn't have to pass an eviction check. They didn't have to pass all these things. And I have people inquiring literally every single week saying, I'm stuck in a hotel. There's no, I'm paying all this money in this rundown hotel. I have nowhere to stay. Collar people, and their credit scores are 500, right? But they can pay in advance week to week and stay in a short-term rental, which has been happening for decades in traditional unfurnished housing and even some furnished in Columbia. And so it actually meets an affordability. People who can't even get normal leases can rent week to week. They can rent and pay every 2 weeks. I mean, most people don't even have a month's rent to front in a lot of ways. And we have a lot of that. I've seen single moms, people with little babies coming in. They just lost their job. They got a little bit of money to make it to the next week. And so there's a lot more of that going on here too to help the housing gap where they can't even qualify for a full year lease, nor are they, I mean, they're terrified to take it on, or they've just come to the area, they don't have any furniture, they own nothing, and they're just trying to make a better life for themselves.
Greater allowance for tenancies less than 30.
Yeah, in residential areas, because you know, what if somebody, that low income family, they have a 3-month gap that they need to pay week to week, month to month. They can't put down first and last month's rent plus a security deposit plus meet all these credit guidelines or whatever. Well, the Columbia rental economy has been servicing that for decades. That week to week renter, that this would completely outlawed and banned technically, although it's still happening.
Well, established use.
Now, of course, any use that was conforming at the time it was established, so not short-term rentals as, you know, sort of Airbnb type rentals, but uses, rental of properties that was conforming at the time it was established remains, you know, popular term would be grandfathering. We'd say lawful nonconformity. And if we were to try and shut that down, I'm sure Mr. Peden would come let us know immediately that that was inappropriate. I saw a gentleman over here.
I'm Bobby McKeever. I live out on Hampshire Pike. I have a farm. I'm not in the city, but the city's getting close to us. My family's had this farm since 1807, and we have a 3-bedroom cottage on our farm. The Tennessee Agricultural Experiment Station out here has a full-time staff member that works on what they call agritourism. Now, agritourism, part of that is pumpkin patch, the Satterwhite farm out here, or have a music venue, have an Airbnb, a wedding venue. Use other ways to use your farm so a small farmer can stay in business. Is everybody in this room happy with the development? You know, our farm they've just about come all the way out to us, and they're going to put us in the city. We're Greenbelt. But, you know, anytime you do regulations like this, there's always unintended consequences. And we've been doing this 12 years, and I think we got a 4.9 rating. People come back. We had a couple from Istanbul, Turkey, came and stayed 2 months because they wanted to have a home birth. And, you know, the midwives down at the farm delivered a baby in our cottage. We've had a poet from Sweden come stay, you know, extended stay. We have a good bit of extended stay people, but we do rent out by the weekend. We have families come in for softball tournaments. We have people come in for the Rory Feek Homestead thing. And people enjoy being on our farm. And I think it makes Murray County, it helps our image. And I'm just against, well, I don't know if there's enough data. How many Airbnbs are there? How many VRBOs are there? How big a problem is it? How do you get the data to understand the problem?
You know, about 30 to 50, there's probably many, many more.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, in our case, I think we're an asset to the community. And, you know, we have people come back and back. We got somebody staying with us now that's here for a month he's here for, he's a singer-songwriter from Canada. He's got his wife and daughter here. They've been taking pictures, putting them on Facebook. I'm talking about 30, 40 pictures a day, you know, the cows. And what I'm saying is that
What would be your regulation permit?
I'm in agreement with the first gentleman. You know, I don't think government ought to be encroaching on homeowners. And, you know, like Airbnb, they're not going to have any wild parties on our place. Because, you know, they have to drive by our house to get to the cottage. It's about 300 yards away.
So if you were to look at our use table, I should have printed it out. You know, it has all the zoning districts and uses listed, and your short-term rental is one of the uses, and it says a P, or I guess it's permitted or prohibited or permitted subject to limitations. So it sounds like you'd say all the way across the table that should say permitted, just everywhere in the city. Short-term rental should be permitted.
Is that?
I'm just asking you under what circumstances should they not be permitted?
So it sounds like none.
I don't think there should be any, but, if there's a problem with, parties, or they're not managing their property, or, neighbors are complaining, I think that's, a case-by-case situation.
What would you do in that?
Wouldn't know what to tell you. I'm not that familiar with the government, but city government, but
Noise laws and stuff like that anyway, that we call the police.
There's
Deal with
There's
that.
already ordinances.
yeah.
right, so that might be, zoning might not be, zoning may not need to adjust other regulations. That's bad.
I'm Ruth McKeever, and I just wanted to add one thing. The couple that's there now with their 10-year-old daughter from Canada initially booked for a month. And then because of things that happened, he had to change it to 3 weeks. So in the case of if you had restrictions of anything less than a month, he wouldn't have been able to stay. He would have had to find another place to stay because he wouldn't meet that requirement of a minimum of a month stay. Anyway.
I think I need to explain the agri. Okay. The purpose of agritourism is to allow small farmers to stay in business and keep, we have 175 acres out there, and we don't have any intention of ever seeing it developed. I don't care what the developer, how much money he brings. We've had it forever, and we're going to keep it. Matter of fact, I've sold it to my son, who's 39 years old. He's planning on keeping it. But the income we make on this cottage is a portion of my farm income, because that's the way the Department of Agriculture perceives it. Raise a few cows, rent off some land for crops. I have a stage out there. We had one music event and decided that's not what we wanted to do. But the pumpkin patch out here, that's agritourism. Christmas tree sales on a farm, that's agritourism. But the Airbnb falls under that same category.
Looks like this gentleman is.
Yeah, this person's been waiting patiently. Hang on, just.
Hi, I'm Susan Doerr, and we live in Billings, Montana, and we have an Airbnb here in a house here in Columbia. Our daughter and family moved here in 2005, and we came to visit them and started staying longer and longer. We were like tenants, so especially as soon as those grandkids started coming. And the grandkids got older, and we were like, well, we can't really stay in the rooms for 6 weeks, can we? And so we went ahead and bought a house in Columbia in 2019. But the only way that it's affordable for us to come down here and stay weeks at a time is for us to Airbnb it while we're not here. And like Michael was saying, it's not a question of, I'm not renting long-term to anyone. I'm not living here, and I don't want to hire a property manager or anything. I can't, I have cleaners that come in every time, and I know what's going on with my property, and some maintenance people. I also have neighbors that I talk to when we moved in, so that if there's any kind of situation, they can contact me. They have my phone number. But I would sell my house. I wouldn't rent it. There'd be no long-term rental. Since we started coming out here in 2005, this landscape has changed so much, like you were saying. There's so much building going on. I can't believe the number of houses that are going up. Multifamily, townhomes, condos, single-family homes. And I don't think anyone's telling them what they have to do with their homes. They're like, you're going to build this, and then you're going to have to just live in it. You can't long-term rent it or short-term rent it or anything. To me, that seems, like Rob was saying, government shouldn't be encroaching on that area. So I'm the everywhere type of person. And I want to come back here someday and live in soon. Well, like I mean, a lot of townhomes do have HOAs, and they can't have short-term rentals, but it's not the city coming in and saying you're going to buy this property, but this is the only thing that you can do with it is you live there because you own it.
So they, like, all the properties.
Right.
Instead of zoning, if I understand correctly, instead of if somebody
Right, through their HOAs and that type of thing. Yeah. But our Airbnbs, and I know a lot of the short-term rentals, they employ a lot of people. I have so many super nice letters from folks that stay long-term, less than 30 days, but they're there for 3 weeks, and they're very excited to come back and be there and to be in a nice, quiet neighborhood. I don't know if you all have seen Christmas Vacation, but if you see the brother and sister sleeping in the same room with each other, you know what they thought about that. So if you get a family with 4 teenagers, I mean, how fun is that to have in a 2-bed hotel room, I think it's great that hotels are coming in. I think Columbia really needs new hotels, but give people the option if they want to stay in a nice new hotel or if they want to stay in a family home. Give the guests the option to do that. That's mine.
So it sounds like I got a few people who've been waiting. So it sounds like what you would like staff to present to Planning Commission and City Council is to, in the use table, short-term rental permitted all across the board. Is that correct? Okay. And so, Councilman, 1 second. And so while I'm making my way back, so we did have 2 on that side, so we'll do 2 on this side and go back. Just want to highlight that me and Austin, Melissa, Paul, we're staff, right? So we're going to be taking the comments you give us and presenting it to Planning Commission and City Council. And there's 7 people on City Council. You've got to persuade 4 of them of something. Put something in front of them and 4 of them vote yes. Right? So be thinking in terms of so we can present it that, hey, everybody who came, or a large number of people who came, said permitted everywhere across the board. But if they don't accept that, then what would be, if you are going to have some kind of regulation, what would that look like? Maybe those of you who have experience operating in other jurisdictions could tell us what's something that works well somewhere else, or something that really doesn't work well. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Alex. I live in the Riverside neighborhood. Unfortunately, my wife and I, we do not own any short-term rental properties. We are folks that are just directly affected by them. Personally, I don't view them negatively. I live near one, very close, to which I see them come about every day, and they're super nice people. For me, I would like to consider possibly like large equity buying up a bunch of properties. I don't have an issue with folks who are just single, like you own one home. Like let's say my wife and I, we finally pay off our mortgage, we want to move, but we want to keep the house as an extra, income. That's almost one way you can get ahead in America. Practically the only way, right? Yeah. It's a dream that a lot of people have. But I see a large issue with these large corporations buying up properties left and right, affecting lower income households. They don't care about these neighborhoods, Ma'am, Montana, you have skin in the game. Your family lives here, right? Yeah. Folks, the through line I've heard is people live here. The owners live here. The folks that I live near, they live here. And they moved into Tennessee, but they care about Columbia so much. I think that's something to consider. It's like, hey, are you an individual owner, maybe a small LLC, a medium-sized business, but not some business in New York that just, hey, sees us, our town, as some investment opportunity that they can just cash out, raise rents, and then bounce whenever it gets bad.
Thank you for that. And so So to that, as you're working to articulate your suggestions, there's a lot of hands here. So we'll go to this side. Who? All right. So zoning regulates the what and the where, and not the who. So we have to treat all similarly situated property owners the same. So if you can articulate that in terms of attributes of the property or the activity that we could identify and regulate that, not necessarily who is the one doing.
Hi, my name is Bernard Schikowski, and I live in a development called Independence at Carter Station. And we've been communicating with you about some of the issues that have been going on over there with short-term rentals that aren't supposed to be there. They're prohibited currently. And some of the issues that we've been having over there have encroached on several of our neighbors. A bunch of us are from there. You know, I heard some of the arguments about the lack of hotels and the quality of the hotels. Well, the mayor said that, you know, we're going to be bringing more hotels into the neighborhood or into the city of Columbia. And I think really regulating those hotels and bringing more rooms here helps to mitigate some of the issues with rooms. I personally have stayed at Airbnbs and they've been great. And I think properly run and regulated, they're okay. But the problem is that when you buy into a neighborhood like Independence, you're told these are single family homes. And then we find out that, you know, Pulte is selling to investors for rentals. They're selling to other people who are running LLCs out of there and short-term renting them to the battery plant. We have several homes in our neighborhood that are that currently that should not be operating in our neighborhood under the current regulations. And, you know, it's easy to, I understand that it's a lucrative business and run properly, it can be great for people. It's a great investment and stuff, but until the business is run next door to you, you know, and then you have to deal with the traffic and the different people that come in and out. And yeah, it's true that if they raise heck and, you know, and have parties and stuff, that's regulated currently. But the owners of these Airbnbs aren't the ones that have to deal with that. It's the homeowners who invest in these properties, you know, looking at it long term. My wife and I moved here to retire. And the last thing we expected was to move into a neighborhood that was supposed to be single family homes. And we're getting run over by rentals and these boarding houses basically for the battery plant. And, you know, it's frustrating because our fear is that it will affect the value of our home in the long term, you know, and what will happen with the quality of life there that we were expecting to have over the long term. So I think that in certain areas, Airbnbs are fine. I think that they're a great investment, but I don't agree that they shouldn't be regulated in some form, because then all of a sudden it's the Wild West. You know, anybody could turn their home into a business. You know, and I don't agree with that. I think that there are certain areas that they should be allowed. They do meet a need, like for people who are looking for a place short term to stay, who maybe need to be near a hospital or, you know, or visiting family. I think they're appropriate in certain conditions and areas, but not everywhere. I think residential homes, you know, where the builder is saying these are single family homes and stuff, that's what they should be, because that's what we're investing in.
In your community, communities like this.
Yes. Yes.
And what places would?
I think the current areas that you have open up right now seem to meet a need for the area. And, you know, I mean, I'm not against expanding to certain areas or parts of the town, but, you know, I think it needs to be carefully planned out. I don't think it should be open up and, you know, willy-nilly anybody can. I mean, I understand that there's permitting and things that have to happen in order to do that, but I think it should still remain regulated to a certain extent, because, you know, we see our homes as an investment in the long term, and we want to keep that quality of life. We have a great neighborhood, and there's so many good people that live there, and we just don't want to see that cheapened by you know, allowing these things to happen. I mean, we've been fighting this issue in our neighborhood for over a year now.
You have a unique circumstance.
Yeah.
Is there any circumstances appropriate.
Well,
So I'm Jen Jameson.
Good to meet you.
eh.
Good to meet you too. So let me talk
Well,
about.
one more thing. I think that in a residential neighborhood like ours that we live in, I think they should be long-term rentals only. I don't think they should be Airbnbs. That's my opinion. Single family.
Yes. So I am this is the downside to having these short-term rentals. So in my development, as he said, Pulte sold these houses as investment properties, and they're under contract with GM and Ultium Battery Factory, and they're housing Korean workers that are there for 6 months, and then they rotate them out. I have them both sides of me and across the street, and I can see 5 within my front yard. I have had people come into my yard. I have the cameras. They're walking in my yard. I have them coming up, and they're in my driveway beside my garage door. I've had them try and come into my house. So I'm a single woman living surrounded by them. I have on camera my neighbor across the street was urinating in his front yard. Then I had another day, he was in my yard again. I had to call the police and have him banned from my house. He's not allowed to be in my property. 2 days later, he violated that. So they should not be in single family home developments unless it's a single family and it's at least a year.
Thank you for that. And okay.
Go through Kevin. All right. I mean, this lady poured her heart out. Yeah, no. Y'all don't get them. Kevin's a great guy.
Okay, I think Councilman Coleman must have left. So. Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you. David Gebhardt, my wife and I are off of Trotwood. I think one thing that I've heard from everybody is that there's an intense interest in the well-being of Columbia, and so I really appreciate that. I feel that as well. I think the concerns, at least in my point of view, about short-term rentals are just standard concerns. It's traffic, it's noise, and I'm not sure that zoning is the hammer to solve that particular issue. And I think we're ignoring, in some cases, the benefit that the short-term rentals bring. One thing Columbia is not, it's not East Nashville, right? People are not coming down here to party. They're not. I mean, it's been our experience, and we've heard it from everybody else. People are coming down here for family events. They're coming down here for, a yoga retreat. They're coming down here for this or that are, they're wholesome. They're here because they see the beauty of Columbia and they want to be a part of it. And, Motel 6 down by the interstate is just not going to cut it. They want an experience that feels good, that is in line with the historic character and the charm that Columbia is. That's why it's grown the way it has and will continue to grow. And squashing that, I think, would be a real shame. Yeah, I would allow it everywhere by right.
Mr. Gebhardt, would that include uses? So are you talking about just about short-term rentals or accessory uses that come with that?
I mean, I would think as long as you're being a good neighbor, one ought to be able to do it.
Okay, and so throughout the city, across the board. Okay. Austin, do you have a sense of the earliest hand up over here? I know. Okay.
Good evening, I'm Steve Napier. This is my wife, Lori. We're lifelong residents and natives of Murray County. You've seen it through good times and bad times. There's been a lot of raw property values. It's great if you got a property to sell. It can be more challenging than a property that you want to buy. But I've got a property in Riverside, got a property on Trotwood Avenue. Riverside is residential, and the Trotwood is commercial. I can envision there are probably pockets of use, certainly along Trotwood Avenue, certainly in the Riverside area around Riverside Drive and Carter Street. So I'm more of a laissez-faire type of approach, I guess, to it. I just don't want the heavy hand of regulation. People should have a chance to enjoy quiet and respectful enjoyment of their property. We basically have a medium-term rental. Had a GM multi in person. We've lived in Riverside 10 or 15 years ago, and more recently, we've seen a re-gentrification and just a really cleanup and just update in Riverside. And we added to that equation. We spent some money to increase the curb appeal of property we have in Riverside. I feel for people who bought property and maybe the developer said, okay, we'll take all comers in all situations. I feel that's unfortunate. I feel for you there. But basically, Columbia, the city basically is promoting the Arts District. They're promoting downtown. I'd like to see more emphasis in Riverside because Riverside is contiguous to downtown. Walking distance, I think it's a selling point. So my concern would be with, if you had area that had mixed-use commercial, be more open-minded to allow additional use in those commercial pockets, we expand the pockets of area up, say, for instance, Riverside Drive, Carter Street, Trotwood, maybe different thoroughfares. But people are coming here for a lot of different reasons. The nicer hotels are at the interstate. I hope there'll be some nice hotels and things maybe come to downtown. But Columbia has a lot to offer, and people are coming here for a lot of good reasons. A lot of people are migrated from other states, and we're glad to have you, we want all the good people, So anyway, I just want to share my piece about that. And I'd be more laissez-faire, be more open-minded, and look at maybe mixed use where you can expand those pockets.
So, Mr. Baker, it sounds like you said your preference is to allow it everywhere, but you understand it you can't get 4 people on council to say yes to allow it everywhere. What would be appropriate?
I guess you'd have to fall back to a case-by-case basis there, and I think a case can be made in Trotwood Avenue, Riverside Drive, Carter Street, different places. I've got, like I said, this other property, a commercial property on Trotwood Avenue that I wouldn't mind maybe putting something on the back side of this property. If somebody just needs a place to stay short-term, that'd be more where I'd like to do something short-term because it's not a very scenic per se, but it could be a nice place to accommodate somebody for a short-term.
Just to kind of, I know you had a question, ma'am, but just to kind of keep the meeting moving, I know we have some ideas here on the board about maybe allowing short-term rentals as conditional use. It seems like there's overwhelming sentiment towards allowing them throughout the community. But just by show of hands, I'm just curious if there was a process where we did regulate them by conditional use. And a conditional use is basically a special use permit. It's nothing that is unique to other communities among Middle Tennessee that have them. Do you think the neighbors should at least be notified, or the neighbors should be aware in some way that a Airbnb is next to them if it's in a residential neighborhood? You don't think the neighbors? Okay, and I'm just curious because in our department, we have to be non-biased. We have to see everybody's approach. That's why we're having this session here, because it's democracy in action. We're trying to hear from the public, but there's also going to be that side of the public that unfortunately aren't going to be at the meeting, and they're going to call development services, and they're going to have concern about the number of cars that might be parked. They're going to be concerned about the strange people that they're not used to seeing in their neighborhood. So I just think in going before council, we may have to craft some sort of language that's fair for everybody. I know a gentleman had spoken that a young lady had spoken. She doesn't mind having regulations. We just want to know what the regulations are. So maybe, Kevin, I know you alluded to zoning. It's not about the person. We unfortunately can't regulate if it's a New York investor or a local. Legally, that's something we can't do. But if there's some sort of thought about that, if anybody has. And I know this young lady, if I can, I know you had your hand up for quite some time. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm Denise Tabscott, and my husband and I, we actually live just outside of the city limits in Murray County, and so I was really interested in what was happening here because I feel like it will start to expand. For a little background, we bought our place, a farm, and thought we were going to move into it with our young children because we were living up in Franklin. We thought it would be great to get out in the country, and we lived out here for the summer and realized we were spending our entire life driving back and forth to their events up north. And so we had bought our dream property, and we didn't want to let it go, but we couldn't let it sit empty. And so back at that time, this is like 10 or 12 years ago, we said, well, we'll try this Airbnb thing. you know, I don't know who's going to want to come stay out here, what they're going to do. And we were so surprised that it met a need, and it allowed us to keep our property until now, when now our kids have gone off to college and my husband and I have moved down here full time. And so Airbnbs, short-term rentals, provide great, you know, opportunities for people. I think that there is a lot of fear mongering around short-term rentals when we hear, you know, all of these people. We actually have short-term rentals in 3 different states, and we have hosted, you know, thousands of people in our homes. And in that thousands of times, I've had one party and one issue. Because if it, like somebody said earlier, if it would have been happening, we would have been shut down. We took care of it right away. My neighbors were really happy. And there are other ways of, you know, tackling those problems. You probably could talk to all of the owners here. If those kind of, you know, you hear, you know, there's parties all the time. You hear about these national, you know, things happening. That's never, we haven't heard about it here in Columbia. So I think it's really dangerous to start regulating things, because you say traffic, number of cars. What's to stop somebody who lives in their house full time from throwing parties, from having 10 cars at their house, from, you know, if you say, well, we've got to regulate the kind of people and notify the neighbors. Am I going to have to notify the neighbors if my alcoholic, you know, brother-in-law comes and stays and could be a danger? I mean, it really gets dangerous to what kind of things are we going to have to start notifying people about and regulating. And, you know, if you're not going to do it to normal everyday people living in their house, you shouldn't do it to people that are renting out their house. Because if there are problems, they're going to be taken care of by the police or by other things. If I throw a big graduation party at my house and I have a bunch of teenagers out there, they're drinking, they're, you know, doing whatever, you know, how is that solved? That's solved by calling the police, and the police come and shut it down. And that's what should happen at rentals, not, you know, regulating it on the front end. You know, if there's problems, regulate it then, or fine it then, or so. I am all for keeping. I'm saying fining. You know, do it by fines, or by, you know, if there is a regulation, if there's, you know, so many issues where police have having to be called or things like that, you know, maybe losing your opportunity to have one. But I would say I am for the allow by right everywhere, but if there has to be a compromise, you know, applying for a permit might be one of those compromises. But I feel for people that are, you know, struggling like this lady with, but what she described is a long-term rental. It's not a short-term rental. And so that should be taken care of in other ways.
So I think what a lot of people in this room would like to see is permit by right everywhere in the city. And for me in Austin, our jobs would be a lot easier, right? You call up, say, hey, can I do a short-term rental? We can say anywhere, and we're done. So you've made our lives a lot easier. Right. But let's assume, so your lives are better as as operators of short-term rentals. As administrators, we don't have anything to administer.
Right.
Sweet. Let's assume that you can't get 4 people on council to vote yes to that. So then what does it look like?
Well, one of the things that
I have to ask you for.
One of the things that, and I was going to say this, and I'm glad you said that, but one of the things that I think, and I have a question, the overlays here, am I understanding correctly that in business or mixed use, you have to have an owner occupying it?
That's right.
Okay, so that doesn't make sense to me, because if a short-term rental is a business, it should be able to be operated in a business district. And having someone live there seems weird and crazy. And then I would also say, if there had to be a regulation about an owner being on the property, I would say look at, because in like this gentleman's situation, my situation, we actually have 2 homes that are on our property. Would that mean as long as you're staying in a home that's on the property, or do you have to actually be staying in the home that's, you know, being rented out?
That's an excellent point. So right now, even where short-term rentals are permitted, like in an owner-occupied home, they're not permitted in what we call accessory dwelling units. So say if you have a detached garage that you've converted into an accessory dwelling unit, the ADU is permitted everywhere in the city. but you're not currently allowed to use that as a short-term rental. So that's something also to sort of throw into the mix.
Would a whole nother house be considered an accessory dwelling? Like it used to be 2 houses, we bought both properties, now they're 1 property?
If it was originally 2 separate lots of record, there'd just still be 2 lots of record. But if you were to construct a new accessory dwelling unit on your property, you know, kids are moving home, kids got left, can't finish school, but they aren't ready to move out on their own, so they're living back there. Somebody's mother-in-law is living there. That's a classic thing. That mother-in-law suite situation, right now you can't use that as a short-term rental.
Yeah, I would be against that.
And right, so, and I think you mentioned being from Franklin, so lots of communities.
Not anymore.
Okay, lots of communities across Middle Tennessee, well, I shouldn't say lots, but some of the ones we've looked at. So they have sort of, where we would allow short-term rentals in owner-occupied homes, they allow them by permit, but you can get a permit and you can do it without living in it. And then where we prohibit them entirely, they allow them if it's owner-occupied. So that's a possible, you know, is that something people here would receive well? No.
No.
When is the election for the council members?
Well, so there are 2.
Sorry, we've been very respectful, and I really appreciate that. That was tongue in cheek. I know, sir, tongue in cheek, but I'm telling you, the consent of the government is very important. Yes, and I do appreciate that. And I just wanted to kind of clarify that. I've heard a lot of things. That's come up a few times, but I just want to kind of clarify that point. So the unconstitutional part. Everything that you see that is regulating this particular type of use has all been voted upon, all been public forum, 2 years in process. There was nothing hidden. You could have come at any time. You could have talked to council members. Nothing was hidden from that standpoint. So they have the right under Title 13 and state law to develop these regulations. And that's what they've done. And we've given you all the opportunities to comment on them. So I don't think anything's unconstitutional. I don't want there to be thought that, oh, we just rammed something down somebody's throat here. No, this is what was set up starting in 2026. Now, I don't know how many people here started short-term rentals after 2020. I think it's been several. So I just want to clear that up. And I think our challenge is what I'm hearing is I hear home a lot from both sides. Home. We should want to be able to live in a home. We want to be able to rent them. What's the definition of it? I think that's going to be one of our things that we look at. Trying to
Yes.
So thank you. I just wanted to clear that up. That we didn't do something behind the dark post here. We did everything out in the open. There's plenty of opportunity for that to be reviewed. Online, social media, surveys, lots of things to be done. So we came up with this after that process. Absolutely. Through that process. Through that process. Yeah. It was discussed at Planning Commission. At Planning Commission brought up that topic during the review process. It wasn't hidden in the document. It was all in the act. There's nothing here that wasn't enacted by the. I can't be by the elected representative. That's very good.
Hi, my name's Michelle Titus. I live in Liebers Fork, and I own a property on Riverside, right on Riverside Drive. I've had that as an Airbnb since 2017. I've had a business permit for it issued. It's still valid until the end of the month. I pay business use taxes on it. It's always, I have hotel motel records from when Airbnb wasn't paying those things, and that wasn't a Tennessee state law. And I know that there are, I think I've hosted over 500 individuals. I would say anywhere between 50 to 80 have purchased homes in the Columbia area. They're here for relocation. And that's tens of millions of dollars that the Airbnb and the short-term rental has brought in. I think what I'm hearing is there needs to be some type of checks and balances so that things don't get out of control. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. You know, I've always had it. I got audited a couple of years ago and made it through in flying colors. So, there's been some type of regulation. And I think, in other short-term rentals, you have to apply for a permit to do an Airbnb, and then there's a process through that. And I think that would be like an adequate compromise. When I bought the house in 2015, I had left it was either a washer or a dryer out for way too long. And somebody in the permit, came in, took a photo of it, and in the mail I got a ticket for such a thing. And I took care of it right away and whatnot. But I think I hear what everyone's saying. But if we have to come to a compromise, and if we have to come to some type of presentation to get those four, we're going to have to compromise somewhere. And I think most Airbnb owners would be like, oh yeah, this is my process, and this is this, and we can go through the permit, and that would be my point of mediation for the council to hear is, sure, I could fight grandfathering in, I could state different laws, but why would we need to do that? I purchased because I believed in Columbia, because we were putting money into the high schools, because, there was commerce. And I just don't hear a lot of irresponsibility on the Airbnb owners. We take good care of our properties, and we take good care of those who are staying at our facility, staying at our home.
Thank you. So, was that two on this side? I think we need one over on this side. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead, I'll get to it. I was just going to say, it seems like the two biggest issues are neighbors and how it affects the neighbors, and then affordable housing is what I've heard. I don't know if the legislation right now fixes those two issues, but I do feel like we do need to address those two issues. So what happens if you do live right next door to something and it's a really bad situation for you, and you own your home and you're a proud homeowner? Who can you call, and how does that get regulated? And I liked her idea of maybe, like, if you're not regulating your Airbnb, you get a ticket in the mail or something, a neighbor can call, and there's some sort of regulation, because most people here, it seems like, who do own Airbnbs are trying really hard to do a great job taking care of the property. On my street, probably the nicest house on the street is actually an Airbnb. It was a junker house. Somebody came in and fixed it up, and it really transformed the street. But if they didn't do that, I would want, as an owner, I would want a way to say, hey, they're not taking care of the property because it does affect me. So I think we need some sort of answer for that, because we all want to keep Columbia safe and charming and beautiful. We love this town. So I think we need to solve that. And then affordable housing, could we pay tax? If you have an Airbnb, you pay taxes, and that goes towards the government doing something for affordable. Well, I know, but could the taxes that they're paying go towards solving the affordable housing problem? Could there be something that the government does to solve the affordable housing? Because I do think that's also a crisis that does need to be addressed, although I appreciate what he said about, I do think short-term rentals seem to really help some people who can't get long-term housing. But it seems like those are the two big issues. And I don't know if this currently solves that, but maybe we could talk about what could we do to solve those two issues.
So this sounds like a permitting process. Do you think that should be available throughout the city or in particular parts of the city?
Well, I'm more just saying that I think we're just all talking, I want Airbnbs or don't want Airbnbs, but it seems like we need the answers to those two problems. I don't know what my solution would be, but yeah, affordable housing and then keeping the neighborhoods charming, maybe only a certain number. Or I do think there has to be, if you're not taking care of your property and there's an Airbnb owner is not taking care of their property, there needs to be some way for a homeowner to say, hey, this is causing me an issue because I live on this street. The thing is, that can happen with long-term property, long-term renters as well. So that's the hard thing. It's not just Airbnbs. The nice thing about Airbnb people is they leave. If they're horrible people, they leave in a few days, whereas long-term renters are just there.
You said a certain number. Do you mean across the city, or right now?
A certain number allowed on a street. Yeah, because I also understand this gentleman's concern, like in East Nashville, I have a friend that lives there, the whole street just gets bought up for Airbnb and it's just party central. So maybe there is some sort of like 10 allowed per 20 houses. I don't know. I don't have an exact thing, but if we have to come to some sort of agreement where we can't just say everybody gets to do whatever they want, maybe there needs to be something like that. So that's my 2 cents.
We do currently have, like, so for duplexes, there's a limitation on, there's a requirement for dispersion of duplexes. You can't have more than a certain number on a block. We have limitations on the concentration of, like, check cashing places. Those are difficult things to administer, but that is an idea we've seen in other jurisdictions. What's the general reaction in the room to that?
The number of permits?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the whole city or in a neighborhood?
In the city, we're going to ban it in our neighborhood anyway, HOA. I mean, in a geographic area.
Yeah.
Of the number of permits.
Yeah, like a per block, or she said street, or maybe by district. Yeah. Okay, I see you there. Let me grab someone on this side, and I'll come back to you. Back here.
Hello, my name is Britt Cox. I live over in the Armstrong Meadows area over on the other side of Columbia State. I moved down here this year from Nashville, so I understand all the people who are talking about Nashville and what's going on up there with the companies coming in and buying up houses and things like that. It sounds, just from listening to everybody, I would probably go with the permit thing. Get rid of the zoning, do the permits, because then, I mean, from what I heard earlier tonight as well, you've had the zoning for 2 years, and people aren't following it, right? So obviously there's something else has to do. So get rid of the zoning, do permits. I know some people might not like the idea of permits, but if that's the compromise, then that's something that could help. Again, you could regulate the permits either through what we were talking about, a percentage, or I would also say let HOAs decide what they want for their individual areas. Let it be up to the homeowners of how many they want, or if they want any at all. And for the permit, one reason I think that would be a good idea is because I know Airbnb and Vrbo and some of the others have their own regulations that people have to follow, but I also heard there were some people who went on platforms like that. And so just making sure that they at least have a standard to set up to for their short terms, especially if people who are low income are using them as a stopgap. I know people not here, and I don't know anyone in Murray County, but in other areas of Middle Tennessee who take advantage of people like that. And so I've been in houses, I've heard other people talk about them renting houses that don't have air conditioning or heat, right? Just because they're low income and they can't do anything about it. So that would at least make sure there's a standard of anyone who's doing short-term rentals for people. So that would be my main one.
Would that be something in your mind that administratively at a staff level, we just look at a checklist and maybe in a day or two issue the permit, or something that should go to like the Board of Zoning Appeals, so maybe on a 30 to 45-day timeline where neighbors are notified and have an opportunity to speak to a deliberative body?
Probably in between those. Probably in between those, not so long as the 30 to 45 days, but maybe not as quick as the same day or the next day. You know, somewhere where you can make sure they are up to standard, they can bring it up to the standards or of whatever the rules are for the permits. And then once they do that, you can issue the permit or whatever it might be there.
Okay.
And then you can take away permits if, as someone mentioned, police are called too often, right? You have something you can do to keep people from doing that.
Oh, thank you. I'm Kim Stebbins. I right now have a midterm traveling nurse rental, but it's in my home. It's an upstairs apartment guest suite that I remodeled. I'm in Riverside. I don't really know where I stand with that because my house has been commercial. I think it can go either way, commercial, residential. No? Oh, that's what they told me when I bought it.
Me too.
It's liars. Well, whatever. I mean, this apartment, my kids stay in it, my friends stay in it, and sometimes I have people for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It's nothing but the nicest people. Nice, nice, nice. I've met people from all over the world. But I would like to go back to early on, and I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry. Alex. Something that Alex mentioned that's been working on me, and that is the displacement of people. And I was wondering if there's a way to target the areas that are more at risk for that and not allow that kind of investment to happen. I don't know if it's even possible.
Not directly, but through sort of zoning or the identification of an overlay area. So that's one idea, is to identify, maybe a radius from the square, not necessarily where it would be prohibited, but where it would be allowed to like work out from some location square, match up the art district or historic district, across some other polygon.
Yeah, doesn't seem like there's a good answer there.
So I know a lot of people, we're about 30 minutes over time. I know a lot of people have more comments to make. So we do have a survey online. It's linked on our website. Our social media folks put it out on social media. I can direct you to it. You can fill it out here before you go if you want. Some of the staff will hang out for a little while and talk to people individually if you want to. If you've got some suggestions you want to make sure to get to us. Our business cards are out. And Paul and Austin, but I'll be the one drafting the material that goes to the Planning Commission. So make sure I get whatever your suggestions are. I think the Vice Mayor is going to close this out.
That was probably the fastest hour and a half we've had in a long time. I understand both sides. I understand y'all want to do what you want to do with your property, and I understand what this lady said right here because I live in a subdivision, and we have maybe a few, but also I have a single daughter that lives by herself. So there is a way to do this properly, I'm pretty sure. Go to your council member. Talk to them. Let them know Councilman Wiles is still here. Even though we have an election, they are still doing their job. Go to them. Talk to them. Write down what y'all think that y'all would want to see happen. Get it to us. We had a lot of ideas come around here today. But one thing I hear a lot of is VROB and the other rental platform. We're not talking about Facebook Marketplace. How do we regulate those people doing what they do? I like a lot of ideas of trying to figure out how to just common ground, like the mayor would say, if both people are mad, then everybody's happy. So we're giving and taking. So I appreciate y'all being here, but get to your council members, come to these people here. They're trying their best. We did come to y'all. We have come to y'all to get y'all's opinions, and I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you.
I do apologize. Debbie Wiles, Ward 2 council person. I was going to slip out before you started. Thank you so much. That's the first thing. We are overwhelmed at the presence tonight, and we certainly thank you for your consideration. And we look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you, Randy.
Thank y'all. Have a good night. Be safe.